All right, so we are continuing our series on the words of Jesus, and we're all about being God's ambassadors, his disciples. I'll remind you again, the call is to come and see. So here today, we're going to have an opportunity to see what the teaching of God is, to hear that teaching. The second call is to come and follow. It's one thing to hear and to see what God wants us to do. It's another thing to say, I will follow. Now, the third thing is, if we will see, if we will follow, then his promise is, I will make you into what I want you to be. So here is a wonderful truth that happens every single Sunday. You see, you have an opportunity to follow, and if you will do those two things, his promise to us is that he will make us into what he wants us to be. So we're here, the Sermon of the Mount. Jesus is speaking to his ambassadors, his disciples, and to the crowd. And he is really challenging them. I hope you can get a grasp of this. Every time I've been preparing, I tell you, it's been heart-rending going through the Scripture. And I think sometimes we read through it so quick that we miss kind of the intent. So each one of these words that Jesus is telling his ambassadors, his disciples, is really hard for them to hear. Okay, remember what he says to them? You know, here is the righteousness of the people that you think are the most righteous in your society. The Pharisees, the teachers of the law, the people that you respect as spiritual men of faith. So here is their righteousness, but their righteousness doesn't cut it. Their righteousness is just like this outward shell. But I am calling you to go beyond this. Unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will not enter the kingdom of God. He begins giving illustrations to help them understand this. Remember, he talked about adultery and said, it's not just the act, it's what's going on inside of your head. He talked to us about the words that we say against people, and he said, call somebody Raka, you're in trouble. And we learned that it was more than just the physical words. If there is anger inside of your heart, that's a problem. Your righteousness has got to surpass that. We looked a couple of weeks ago at the issue of divorce. And the same thing, you know, to them to hear that message, that was a tough word because their society, there were 4 and 5 divorces happening. And it was just accepted that this is the way things was supposed to be. But yet God was calling them to honor their commitment. It was further than they thought. And the reason why he's doing this is because he's teaching them, I want you to be salt in this world. I want you to be light, to shine in the darkness. You're going to represent me. Now, how many of you, when you went to kindergarten, knew it all? You don't, right? You go to college, you think you know it all, getting out of high school, and you realize how much you don't know. In the same way, they were here, and this is new stuff that's challenging their heart. And what I want you to do today, I want you to grapple with this, the Word of God. I want you to allow it to work inside of your heart and think about the ramifications of it. So we're continuing today, Matthew chapter 5 and verse 38. Title of my message is, It's Payback Time, Dollar for Dollar. And I will tell you, I've already hinted at this. Man, this is one that I have struggled with this week, praying about exactly how to present this to you. Verse 38, you have heard that it was said. Now remember what Jesus does, this pattern. He shows them what they have believed or what the standard that they thought was, and then he brings them further. So the standard was, you have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. Now, is this from the Bible? Yes, it is. It's from the Exodus, okay? This was a rule given to them there to help keep order. So you have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. Now, in your notes, if you're writing this down, I want you to write this down. And these are 10 acceptable declarations that God is calling you beyond. Now, acceptable, when I say acceptable, it's not acceptable to God, but acceptable in our society today, okay? And this kind of represents this righteousness that's this far right here. So the idea is, if you hurt me, I will hurt you. If you hit my eye, I will hit your eye. If you knock out my tooth, I will knock out your tooth. Now, most of us live by this sometimes unspoken code. It's not like we pull this out every day and say eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But a lot of us live by this principle, this unspoken code. We live by the scale. And by that, here's what I mean. If you do something nice for me, then I will do something nice for you. If you buy me a gift, I'll buy you a gift. And, that part sounds good. But what about the other side? If you hurt me, I will hurt you. If you say something bad about me, I'm going to say something bad about you. And what happens is we have this internal thing that we call probably justice inside of us, where if somebody wrongs us, there is wrong in our world, and until we even the scale, things just do not seem right. And it's like we have a responsibility. If they get my eye, I better get their eye. If they hurt me, I better do this and fulfill this rule. I've got to fulfill this rule, eye for an eye. And sometimes we live by that way. But there's a problem to that. Our flesh loves the power and rush of vengeance. Have you ever been there before? Somebody says something to you and, man, it was not right. And you say in yourself, oh, no, you didn't. And you go back and you start letting him have it. So much so you can feel the pressure rising inside. And there's this moment of pleasure, of power as you are letting them have it in that moment. Would you be honest with me for a moment? Have you experienced that? Yeah. Where does that come from? Man, we feel like we are completely justified, eye for an eye, right there. But there's a problem, and it goes like this. How many of you have brothers or sisters, or grew up brothers and sisters? Did you ever have a little fight? And I say little, because that's how it starts out, right? You just go, boom, boom, and you get stronger each time. I remember one Sunday afternoon, my parents took the Sunday afternoon nap. I thought it was like part of Christianity. You got to do that on Sunday afternoons, but it was religious for them every single Sunday afternoon. And so, which meant that my brother and I kind of just played around. And one of those days, I can remember on the bed, we were having this fight. I remember, hitting him on the back, and then finally my parents come in and break us up. But isn't that the way that it goes with vengeance, revenge? It's not like we can give an equal amount, right? Because we always go just a little bit further, and I'm being very nice about that. When somebody says something bad about us, if we could say an exact, maybe we could, but most of the time we go further, don't we? We push it just a little bit further. We want to make them pay. In our desire to get it equal, we go far beyond that. And that is one of the big problems. In our zeal to pay back, we almost always overshoot. Now, God knew this about us. And you may be thinking, well, I thought the scripture said an eye for an eye. We are justified in doing that. But we need to understand that this eye for an eye is a concession, not an obligation. Remember what we just looked at in this passage, divorce, right? What was said about that? Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, allowed divorce. Because, remember what we talked about? Because ladies were left, the guy leaves them and then wants to come back, and it's just not right. And so God wanted to set it up so that people would not get as much hurt. And so he says, no, if you leave your wife, you cannot go back if you've married since that time. So he was doing concession. He wasn't saying, go get a divorce. He wasn't saying that. It was a concession. And in the same way, this eye for an eye is a concession. He doesn't want us to exact vengeance on someone else. Now, I'm going to give you the ins and outs of that. But let's just say this, that this was a concession, not God's best for us. Now, he gives us some examples to help us understand this. So let's continue on in the scripture. Matthew chapter 5 and verse 38 through 48. If someone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. Now, some of you have the King James Version. I think it says strike. Is that right? Well, anyway, when I've read this before, this is the kind of picture I used to get. Boom, boom, and then you're getting beat up, and in the process you get hammered by somebody's fist, and you're supposed to say, oh, you forgot this side. Try again. Maybe you'll do better this time. That's not what God has in mind. Let's see, Brian, can you come up for a minute? I'm going to test your medieval knowledge. Take this. Oh, yes. Now, if I were to backhand with the glove, medieval time, what is that? It's a challenge, right? It's where we get our term a slap in the face. What do we say when we say it was a slap in the face? It was humiliating. It was an act, it's a snubbing, a humiliation. Thank you very much, by the way, for sparing my face. But this is not a context of all-out hitting. And you may be saying, well, they didn't have gloves back then, and you're right. Most likely it was the backhand like this, okay? But it was a way of humiliating the people. It's not a fist fight that we're talking about. Let's look at this, and let's put this for our 10 acceptable declarations. So here's one. If you humiliate me, I will humiliate you. Have you ever been there before? I think we all have. Somebody does something that makes you feel small. Everything in you is crying out, justice, justice. They have got to pay for what they did. Eye for an eye. I'm going to humiliate them to make them pay. Let's look at the next one. Verse 40. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. And I'll give you the way that I used to understand this too. If someone comes and steals, something from you, you say, hey, let's say they broke into your house and they stole your TV. And you say to them, hey, you forgot the stereo, or you forgot my computer. Come back here. You forgot something, And I kind of took it like that. But look at this. There is a specific situation that Jesus is giving here. And if anyone wants to what? Sue you, where does that usually happen? In court, right? So let's think through the situation. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, okay? So in the court of law, you lose, you have to pay, okay? So if you lose, they feel like you have hurt them in some way, you have wronged them. Instead of just giving them what you are supposed to, what the court demands that you give, I want you to go a step further, and I want you to offer them more. Now, specifically, this does not happen. It's symbolic. You know how Jesus says, if your right eye offends you, cut it out. Remember, his goal was not for them to cut out their eye. The same way here in that society today, they needed their coat. Matter of fact, it was part of their law that they couldn't keep a coat over a day because of the dignity involved there. So what Jesus is saying here, if you have hurt someone and they have wronged and you have to pay, I want you not just to give to them, but I want you to give extra to them. Now, why do you think God might be saying that to us? If you're just doing something because you have to, that's one thing. But if you go the extra mile, I want you to think of two people. A relationship that is broken because of something you did. Maybe you feel like you were guilty or not. You don't know. But there is a wronged relationship. The court says you've got to pay. You do that, but in giving more, you have the opportunity to put a stop to the fighting. Let's go back to eye for an eye and tooth for tooth and think about in that time. Let's say that someone comes and accidentally kills one of your family members, okay? Let's say that they're having a fight. They weren't intending for someone to get killed, but they're fighting, and then all of a sudden he pushes them and he falls in the pit, and this relative of yours dies. Eye for an eye demands that you go back and you find that person and you kill that person that did that. In the process, you might find a few other people that are trying to defend, and you might have to kill them. What happens? It gets bigger and bigger. This eye for an eye doesn't bring resolution. It doesn't bring healing to the relationship. This eye for an eye was a concession. And you know why? Because there was that happening. It kept getting greater and greater. Let's say that one of them, you dishonored my sister. And so he ends up kills the person because he dishonors. And so what happens is this keeps building up and building up. And so they set up this eye for an eye as a concession that according to law, if someone does something, that you go eye for an eye and no more. This was like a boundary that they were not supposed to cross. But the ultimate goal that Jesus is talking about is we want to mend the relationship. Okay, so this is the heart behind that. So 3, if I have to pay you back, I'm not giving one more cent than I have to. It's an acceptable declaration that God is calling you beyond. If I have to pay you back, I'm not giving one more cent than I have to. Let's go on to verse 41. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Now, many of you have heard this before, but just in case there's anybody here that has not heard this, at that time, the Romans were in charge, they're oppressors, and they had the ability, according to law, to force a Jewish person to carry their luggage for 1 mile. Now, it's kind of interesting that they were pretty strict on that mile. If they asked them to go beyond that, they could have gotten in serious trouble. But they could force somebody to do this. Now, for the average Jewish person, this was a great offense. I mean, just imagine, how many of you have time in your day where you can just stop and go for 30 minutes to an hour? Let's say you're right in the middle of a project that you are working on. Let's say you're working out in the fields and you've got to get your harvest in before nightfall, and this Roman officer comes to you and says, carry my bags, and you're like, what? I'm right in the middle. I can't do this. But yet they had to drop whatever they were doing and carry their luggage for that mile. Now, Jesus was telling them, here's the scale. This is what you have to do according to law. Now, Jesus was saying, instead of just filling up and making it equal, doing what you have to do, I want you to go more. Imagine what it was like for that Roman officer to have somebody, instead of yelling and complaining about having to carry the luggage, for them to say, hey, I know you got a ways to go. Can I carry that 1 more mile for you? I think I can afford to do that. What happens there? This is different from everything that they have seen before. There is something different about this person. And again, who is Jesus talking to? His ambassadors, his disciples. I want you to be salt. I want you to be light. I want you to be different. So if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Here's our acceptable declaration. If I'm forced to do something, I'm not going to give you any more effort than I have to. Those of you with kids, or those of you who are kids, your parents ask you to something to do, and you go, oh, do it, I'll take out the trash. So you put the trash in, and I'll do something that I've done before, or kids have done before, but you don't put the liner back in, right? You do the absolute minimum. Or you clean your room, you shove it all in the closet, close the door, you've done it. You've done the minimum that's there. But God is calling us to do more. If you're forced to do something, I'm not going to give you any more effort than I have to. The call is to go beyond that. Again, beyond the norm. Verse 42, give to the one who asks you. Here's our statement. You haven't given to me, so I won't give to you. Remember what I talked about, this balance that's there? Somebody gives to us, we feel like we're supposed to give. But on the opposite side of things, if someone hasn't done something nice to us, if they have never given to us, then that we can have the selfish part of us that says, I don't have to give to you because the balance says that we're all set right now. We're even. I don't have to do anything for you. You haven't given to me, so I won't give to you. But Jesus calls us beyond that to give. Let's look at the next one. And do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. Here's our statement. You haven't let me borrow from you, so I won't let you borrow from me. You know, you have a neighbor and they want to borrow your rake and you're worried about it breaking or something like that. They've never done anything for you. Why should you let them borrow your rake? Jesus calls us beyond that. Verse 43, you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. Is that in the Bible? Yes and no. Yes, love your neighbor. No, hate your enemy. Now, it's kind of interesting how this worked out. The love your neighbor is there, and that's part of the law. And so what they assumed and what was common understanding was that if you have to love your neighbor, then it makes the sense that you don't have to love your enemy. And if you don't have to love them, that means that you can hate them. And that's okay. Because here's what it says. As long as you love your neighbor, you have satisfied stuff. And so the common saying at that time was, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But Jesus says, I tell you something different here. You know, you've got it all set. You're balanced. Your neighbor loves you. You love them. Good. If your enemy hates you, you know, you can hate them. It's okay. But Jesus calls us beyond that. And he says, but I tell you, love your enemies. So here's our declaration. As my enemy, you have not shown me love, so I won't show it to you. Why should I love you? Why should I do anything good for you? You've never done anything good for me. Verse 44, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Here's our statement. As my persecutor, you haven't cared about my feelings. So let's stop and think about what they would face. They would have people ridiculing them for abandoning the true faith. They would have people that would put them in jail for believing in God. Yet Jesus is calling them to care for them and pray for them. How many of you have had people talk about you, put you down, persecute you for the way that you believe? Here's the truth. We are called to care and pray for them. And why do we do this? Verse 45 tells us that you may be children of your Father in heaven. Here's your little rhyme to help you. All of these that we've looked at so far, these are status quo, but Jesus says, oh no. I want you to look at what you've got so far. Here's our declarations. If you hurt me, I will hurt you. If you humiliate me, I will humiliate you. If I have to pay you back, I'm not giving you one more cent than I have to. If I'm forced to do something, I'm not going to give you any more effort than I have to. You haven't given to me, so I won't give to you. You haven't let me borrow from you, so I won't let you borrow from me. As my enemy, you have not shown me love, so I won't show it to you. As my persecutor, you haven't cared about my feelings, so I will not care or pray for you. These are things that we accept as a people today as okay. This is fair. This is our sense of justice. This is our balance. It's the status quo. But Jesus says, oh no, these are not my aims for you. You are my ambassadors. You are representing me. It means that we're supposed to be like him. And that's where the scripture comes in. If you want to be sons of God, representing him to the world, then you need to remember what he is like. Is he that? If you do something mean to him, does he do it to you? If you don't love God, does he stop loving you? Is he that way? God the Father causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. Here's the truth. He brings good things even to those who don't deserve it. And you know, part of us says, well, that's not fair. Do you see all those mean things that they do? Why should they have the nice house? Why should they have the nice car? Why are things going great for them? Don't you see all that they have done wrong? And we can say, God, this doesn't fit our justice. Man, they need to be punished. They need to have more things. And yes, they will be punished for their sins. But yet, isn't it amazing that we don't live in two different places? Notice that it's kind of raining, or maybe it stopped out there. But it rains here at church, you know, and we have bad times. But you don't see nice sunny days over the people of God, and then storms and hail and all this stuff over the people that are not serving God. Or you don't see everyone that's not following God living in poverty and terrible conditions, and the people of God, you know, having these mansions. You don't see that. Why is that? Because God sends blessing on people that don't deserve it. And part of us says, that's not fair. But I want to tell you, I am so glad that God is that way. What if it was an even-Steven thing? Think about all the times that we have sinned against God, every wrong that we've done against God. Would we be living in the bad place? I think we've all sinned and fallen short of God's glory. If we got what we deserved, it would not be good. But thankfully, God gives good things even to those who do not deserve it. Verse 46, if you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? Here's your 9th acceptable declaration. If you love me, I'll love you. Check yes or no, right? If you'll show love to me, I will show love to you. Verse 47, and if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? And this idea of greeting, just think about this. Somebody walks into this door, it's your friend, you go walk them, hey, so good to see you. Man, how you doing? What are you doing? You're expressing kindness to them. You're welcoming them. And what Jesus is saying, if you only greet those people that are your friends, then what are you doing more than anybody else? Here's your statement. If you are kind to me, I will be kind to you, because that's fair. That's the system that we've got set up. Let's look at this real quick. And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Who has a dollar bill here today? Oh man, I don't. Oh, you do. Anybody have $1 bill? Okay. Anybody else? I need one more person with $1 bill. Anybody here? Okay, good. Keep that just one. That's what we need. And I want you to, can you come together just for a minute? I would like I want you to show love to each other. I want you to give each other $1. Wow, are y'all touched? Thank you. You can have a seat. Many of us see this at Christmas, don't we? What has happened here? Yeah, maybe. That'd be a way to get something. Yeah. And I'm pressing the point, but what has happened here is nothing. Right? Just changing up dollars. Nothing at all has happened. And that's the point here. If you're only doing good to somebody that's doing good to you, that's no better than anybody else. Here's what Jesus says. Do not even pagans do that. Think about this. All of these statements that we've talked about, there's a part of us that thinks these are right. We are justified in them. But I want to tell you, would the world argue with you? No. They're on the exact same page. These declarations represent the blandness and the disease-ridden condition of the world. But he is calling us to be the salt of the earth. Do you see the blandness of that? Somebody giving $1 and they give $1 back. That's bland. That's dull. That's nothing great. Somebody letting a neighbor borrow a rake and then you let them borrow a broom. Is there anything great in that? Not really. You're just doing favors one to another. That's the status quo. There's nothing really happening there. And look at that second part. These declarations represent the disease-ridden condition of the world. Why do I say that? Because there is something eating at the heart of our society where if someone does something wrong against us, this feeling that we have got to pay them back, that's responsible for a lot of the social evils that we have today, right? Just think about it. Someone does something wrong to you and you go back, what happens? It gets worse and worse. Think about the murders that take place in our society. How did it start? People getting greater and greater, fighting and fighting until it escalates to that point. What about the giving? The disease-ridden, let's talk about this. Those that are poor and struggling, but yet those that are rich, not and able to give, not doing it because, well, they can't do anything for me. Why should I give? So this represents this disease within us, but yet Jesus is saying to his ambassadors, to his disciples, to the crowd, he's saying to you and me, we've got to be different. I'm calling you to be salt. I'm calling you to come into this situation and bring flavor. You have got to be different. You've got to surpass the righteousness of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. I'm calling you to be salt of the earth. These declarations represent the darkness that causes people to stumble. Just think about this getting even, these standards. People are stumbling around, making stupid mistakes, if that's okay for me to say, because they're following this internal code, eye for an eye. But he is calling us to be the light of the world. By us doing something to someone who does not deserve it, we are casting light for everyone to see. The aim behind, and this is kind of a side note, the aim behind the Sermon on the Mount is not another list of things to do or not do. And I want to be honest with you because I've been grappling with this. And I was looking at this, reading these scriptures, and you can take them a different way. You can take them like, well, if somebody asks me for money, I've got to give it no matter, if I need to spend that money elsewhere. Just think about this. If we did this, we gave all our money away. Let's say someone hits us. We continue. We ask them to hit us again. We allow people to take advantage of us. I don't know about you, but if we endeavor to do every one of those things to the extreme, what happens? Can we even do it? And you're left with this helplessness. God, how can we meet all of these things? This is impossible. And maybe for the people in the crowd that day, they're like, how do we do this? I don't know if I can do all this. You're asking a whole lot. And I think my problem, and I think a lot of us can do this, we think of the specific situations and we say, don't do this, don't do this. And then what we're doing, we're just adding to the list of laws and rules. And we're thinking about all of these things and it seems impossible. We say, woe is me, I can't do it all, God. But that's not the aim behind the Sermon on the Mount. God is looking for something greater than that. I want us to go back to right in front of you here. The list, if we're just going for a list of things to do and not do, this is a cop-out for a genuine change of the heart. So if we just simply added that, well, we're supposed to be friends to our friends, and we're supposed to love our enemies. So we add that to our list. We're supposed to give to anyone. So we add that to our list. And on it goes. We look at this list and say, okay, I'm checking that off. I'm checking that off. Have we solved the problem? Let's say we give to someone. Jonah asks for money, and so I say, here, take the money. This is all I have, but take it. Is that pleasing to God? Yes, we have this nice image. We've done what God told us. We checked it off. You hit me, fine, hit me again. See if I care. Never speaking to you again. What happens? There is no change of heart. These situations are brought here by Jesus to say, hey, you need a heart change. The outside shell is not enough. If you've got the enemy inside of you, if you haven't dealt with the enemy, that's a problem. When people look at you, I want to see Christ inside of you. And that's what Jesus is aiming here. Not a list of things to do and not do. What he is really saying in this, I believe, and you can study this out for yourself, is don't just stop at status quo. I am calling you to go beyond what everyone else thinks. When everyone says stop loving, don't care, I'm calling you to be salt and light, to love, to care for people. And that brings me to verse 48. And again, you can look at verse 48 in a disparaging way, or you can look at it as an encouraging way. Verse 48, be perfect. And I tell you, when I read that, again, I grappled inside. God, how in the world can I do all of these things? How am I supposed to be perfect? Is that what you really want? How can I do that? And yes, God does want perfection on the outside. But really what I believe, he is looking for perfection on the inside. These are the outworkings, the things that we just talked about. These are the outworkings of something inside of the heart. That's what Jesus is really going for. That we get to the point where we don't have to think, what should I do? What does the list say that I'm supposed to do here? What am I supposed to do here? And check it off. Instead, we're here at this point when everybody else is doing this, and there's something inside of us that is calling out, I want you to love in this situation. I want you to do more than the average person. I want you to step out in faith. Be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. See, God is not looking for a cheap imitation. He's not looking for a shell of a righteous man that looks nice on the outside. He's not looking necessarily for just outward perfection. He is looking for perfection in your heart that will naturally come out. That's what God is looking for. So if I were to put this message in one statement, it's this: go beyond the status quo. Love others like God does. Becky, would you mind coming up? And I'll leave on the screen verse 48. And I want to tell you how not to read this, because I could be guilty of reading it this way. It does not say, do perfect, does it? It says, be perfect. It's not necessarily all the do's. It's being who God has created you to be. Being loving, being salt, being light. Would you stand with me? Bow your heads and close your eyes for a moment. I know this is a relatively short time where we're looking at these scriptures, but it would really thrill my heart if you would go home and battle with these scriptures at home, that you would pray, say, God, what is it that you want me to do? I hope that as you've been listening, you've been struggling on the inside and saying, God, I want to be this way. I want to do these things, but honestly, it's hard. I hope and I pray that you've been struggling with the Word of God, because if you're struggling, that means that you are striving to be what God wants you to do. You're trying to follow God. Remember His promise. If you will come and see, you'll listen to His words. If you will come and follow, if you will do your best to follow what He's presenting to you today, He's going to do the work. I will make you into fishers of men. So if you're here today and you feel utterly helpless and you say, God, I desire to please you. I want to do all of these things. Hear me today. What Jesus is more concerned on is you being who He has created you to be loving and kind, even when people do not deserve it. He's trying to use these tools of these situations, just like a master surgeon, to cut out those areas in your heart that are not pleasing to Him. I want to tell you today, listening to what we're listening to today and surgery, it's painful. There's difficult parts about it. But if you will yield yourself to Him and say, God, I want to be who you want me to be. I want it not just to be an outward thing where people see that I do all these things. But Father, you see me. You know exactly where my heart is, and I want my heart to be clean. I want perfection in my heart. I want love in my heart. I want to go beyond what everyone else does to please you, to make you smile, Lord. That's the kind of heart that God wants. I just want to ask you a simple question here today. Do you want to be that? Do you want to have a heart that is pure before God? Do you want that love to shine from you today? And here's what I want you to weigh on the other side of it. Asking for that and having that does mean a change. It means when that internal system of justice, that scale is shouting, get even. Or when that internal scale is saying, they haven't done anything for me. It's going to mean setting that aside and out of obedience, saying, God, change my heart. Help me to love. Help me to go beyond this. To follow you. To be your salt. To be light. To represent you to this world. So with that in mind, I'm not even going to have you raise your hand, but just in your own words, if you desire to have that heart change inside of you, I want you to invite God to work on your heart today, this moment, this week, this month, the rest of your life. Say, God, I want you to begin to work on my heart. Help me to be who you want me to be. Make me a fisher of men. Make me into who you want me to be, Lord. Just take a moment and talk to God.